Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our July live stream. We are here today to talk about making sure that you're not letting free money slip through your fingers. My name's Kate. I'm one of the financial wellbeing consultants at Salary Finance, and I'm joined today by Jason Butler, our head of financial education.
Hello.
We will be getting started in a few seconds, but just before we do, just make sure that you do have a mobile phone or a tablet so that you can participate in our polls and our Q&A. If you just scan the QR code that's on the screen as we go throughout, then you'll be able to take part. So just before we get started, just a quick note to say that this presentation is generic in nature and is not personal advice. If you do need personal financial advice, please consult a regulated independent financial advisor, and you can also get free personal money help from either the Money Helper service or your local Citizens Advice Bureau. So let's get started then. And Jason, I think a really important place for us to start is just by checking in on the cost of living crisis, and how people are feeling today about their finances across the nation. I think, in short, people are still suffering, aren't they? They're still struggling.
They are. Today, obviously Wednesday, we've had the announcement that inflation is still at 2%. It was 2% last month. It's still 2%. I think some people thought it might be 1.9%. But there's still some underlying inflation that's a bit higher in services and stuff. But nevertheless, the last 2 or 3 years has left a mark on many people's households. So although the rate of price increases is slowing down, prices are still going up, and although wages have been going up much higher than inflation, they're still not repaired the sort of scarring that we had over the last 2 or 3 years. However, we are an optimistic bunch here at Salary Finance, and we do agree, we work with what we've got and we are in the real world. We also want to give people a sense of optimism and hope. And so today's session is really about making sure that, obviously, we want people to control their spending and cut out waste if they can, so they can put it to good use. But also we want to make sure that people are getting all the income and all the access to money that they're entitled to just help make things a bit easier.
Yeah, awesome. So I think that leads us really nicely to our first poll, and we'd love everyone to get involved at home as well. So I think the first question is just to take stock of how aware we all are of how much financial support is going unclaimed. So obviously some of these are quite big numbers on here, Jason.
Yeah, well, here's the thing, as we said before, a billion is 1,000 million. And I think you said to me earlier, you were thinking like sort of tens of millions, perhaps hundreds of millions. But when we're talking billions, that's thousands of millions. And the reality is that there is a whole load of money not being claimed, not being used by people. And it's been allocated, it's been put aside, and it's just not being used. It's a bit like your employer giving you £1,000 bonus and you not claiming it, having to tick a box or something to get it put in your pay packet. You wouldn't do that, would you? You would take what was there. Yeah. So this is interesting. So we've got a lot of love for 23 billion, bit less love for 7 billion, 14 billion, not much love for 31 billion. That's
gone at the opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah. So shall we do a little drum roll and see what it is?
So it's actually 23 billion. So you guys at home were spot on. So 23 billion pounds of income-related benefits and social tariffs go unclaimed every year, which is just a staggering number.
Yeah, and it's interesting that to think about that number has actually gone up. That's gone up since last year by £4 billion. So far from people getting what they're entitled to, they're actually leaving more on the table than they were last year. And I interviewed recently a chap called Devon Galaney, who is the founder and CEO of a company called Policy and Practice, who we've partnered with to provide what we call the Better Off calculator. And this is a calculator that helps people identify, based on their circumstances, if there's anything out there that they're not claiming, that they should be claiming, that they're entitled to. And I asked Devon, I said, why has the amount, and they do the analysis on this, these are the guys that know, they do all the research. I said, why has it gone up from 19 billion last year to 23 billion unclaimed? And basically, this is what Devon, how he explained it to me, why it's gone up.
Well, it's a huge number in the first place. So just recognise it's gone from 19 to 23. So it's always been a problem. There's still always been people that don't claim their benefits, right? Or aren't aware of what they're eligible for. It's too complicated sometimes for them to claim. They get stuck, or sometimes they just don't feel like it's for them. I think the reason it's gone up by so much, though, is a couple of reasons. One, the cost of living has gone up, so benefits are uprated. by different amounts actually, if you're working age to if you're pension age. So it's gone up by 6.7% if you're working age, 8.5% if you're pension age over the last year, to deal with the rising cost of living. Worth recognising that doesn't fully cover the rising costs that people have faced, particularly if you're on the lowest incomes. That's been the main reason. I think there's also growing complexity of what's out there. There are new schemes that are out there that, again, it takes a while for people to become aware of them. So that's another reason why people are missing out. And fundamentally, I think as well, it's hard for people to claim, right, in that short space of time. So, when you've got a plethora of new types of support, it takes a while for people to catch on to it. So yeah, it's gone up more than I think you might expect, and actually a lot more people are eligible than you might think. So it's definitely worth checking out.
So there we go. So that's the reason why it's gone up. But what's the reason that people aren't getting what they're entitled to? And I think it boils down, if you look at the policy and practice research, there are three key reasons. One is awareness. I mean, if you don't know about something, you can't claim it, can you? I mean, there's lots I don't know about, but the more aware you are, the more likely you are to engage with and get what you're entitled to. There is also a perception, and in fairness, a reality in some scenarios, to it being a bit complex. We all hear about things. No one wants to deal with stuff that's too complicated or too difficult to understand. However, some of the complexity, the perception is not right. Actually, it's easier to claim or to get stuff than you think. Sometimes there's complexity of different old benefits, new benefits. I get that. But for most people, it's pretty straightforward to claim things. And then finally, and possibly this is the area that we find is not spoken about much, is the stigma. The idea that somehow claiming what you're entitled to from the state either makes you a lesser person, or you shouldn't do that, or they won't pay it to me, or I'm not entitled, or people like us don't get it. Look, we don't live in a perfect world, and we know that things aren't always fair, but the reality is you need to, in my opinion, put this to the back burner. What matters is getting what's yours to help your family, help you get ahead, to help you improve your well-being. So before we get into some of the other aspects and drilling down into some of these unclaimed situations, have we got any questions to get us going?
Yes, we have actually. So one early question is, does the government ever tell you when you're entitled for benefits rather than having to find it out for yourself?
Now that is a good question. Sometimes they do. So for instance, I'll give you an example, the state pension entitlement. You normally do get written to some months before, but you do have to claim your state pension and just pay it to you. Sometimes if you've already claimed previous benefits, like for instance, when we had the cost of living crisis in 2022, 21, 22, I think it was, wasn't it? No, was it the COVID thing? No, cost of living crisis, 22. And some people got those payments of 350 and then several months later, another 350. It was that sort of, I think actually it was 650 in total, I think, and older people got winter fuel payment. They will normally pay it to you automatically without you having to claim if you're already in the system. But if you weren't in the system or you weren't claiming something else, they didn't know you were entitled to it. As we'll see in a minute, there's certain types of benefits which you have to physically go and get. So in the answer to the question, some benefits they tell you about but you have to claim, some benefits they tell you about and pay you them, and some you have to know about and claim. It just depends.
Yeah, super helpful, thank you. I think we're going to come on to this a little bit in a few slides' time. But someone has asked, they've said, I've just purchased a new home. Are there any benefits that I can claim, but I'm not a new homeowner?
Well, we'll come on to general benefits that you may be able to claim, regardless of whether you're a homeowner. The most obvious benefit that you can claim as a homeowner, it's unlikely to be in this case if they've just moved and I'm assuming they can afford it, but it's for people who are in financial distress and who may be missing payments or falling behind on their mortgage. There is basically a low-cost loan option from the government where they'll loan you money to stop you defaulting on your payments, which you have to then repay back over a period of time. That's recently been made easier to get and payable over a longer period of time, etc. And the idea is that if people are in distress with their mortgage rates going up, that would give them something. The general thing about your entitlement to other benefits can be affected by whether you rent or buy, but the broad range of benefits are not necessarily affected by you being a homeowner versus a renter. There's some benefits, but the bulk of the benefits are not predicated on you being a new homeowner. So we'll come back to that in a minute.
Really helpful, thank you.
Okay. Let's just move on quickly. Again, put your questions in because we've got 4 or 5 stopping off points for questions between now and when we finish at 15:15. So The areas where most of this unclaimed benefits, and you'll see last year's is the blue figure, and this year's extra amount is shown in this, I think, is it purple or dark pink? I don't know.
Either works.
But the biggest one is universal credit. Now, universal credit, unbelievably, you could actually be earning sort of £40,000 a year with a couple of children, and you potentially could benefit still from universal credit. Obviously, lower earners, etc. But it is means tested, and basically it's affected by how much savings you've got. So if you've got under 6,000, you'll be okay, but it gets gradually reduced if you've got more over that. And it will be affected by your household income. Now, the interesting thing about universal credit is even if you only qualify for £1 a week of benefit or a month, as it's paid monthly, it opens the doorway to potentially other benefits, which I'm going to explain in a minute. But the classic ones are help from your local authority and things like social tariffs for things like water and broadband, etc. Free dental care, opticians, etc. So even if it's not high in monetary amount, once you're into that qualification, and our circumstances can change, you can go in and out of qualification. It's a gateway, and it also helps you qualify for the Help to Save scheme, which is this up to £50 a month savings for 2 years, get 50% guaranteed benefits, and you can save for another 2 years and get another 50% tax-free, risk-free return. So there's lots of good things that come with it.
Yeah.
What's the other one here? Council tax support. I'm going to come back to that one in a minute specifically. Okay. Very underclaimed. Pension credit, carers allowance. We had a question on that this morning, didn't we, about carers allowance? In fact, my wife didn't realise she qualified because she looks after her elderly mother, and my wife doesn't. She meets the criteria. She doesn't work more than 16 hours a week. She doesn't earn over the so much threshold. Whatever, I think it's £183 a week. But basically, there's lots of people who are doing caring for people. They're not living with them. They're not related to them, but they are looking after them for at least sort of 35 hours a week. When you add it all up, they're doing shopping for them. They're going to see them. They're helping them. They're being there for them, and there's money going, 80, I think it's £84 a week, carers allowance. Now, obviously, you've got to think carefully about that if you're going to be going back to work and stuff. But the point is that, again, it's money going, and broadband. People are overpaying on broadband because they're not claiming it. One of the qualifications is universal credit. Again, this is about halving the cost of your water and your broadband. And it all adds up, doesn't it? £20 here, £20 there.
Definitely.
So let's just look at this in terms of thinking about financial support. You have central government support. So that's things like, we'll come on to it, personal independence plan payments, universal credit, etc. Central government things, state pension, pension credit. Then you have an increasing amount, and I predict this is going to grow, local government support. So this is money that the government has given to your local council, your local county council, for distribution, how they deem appropriate, to people who are in need. It doesn't have to be means tested, but basically a lot of it is means tested, but some of it isn't. Now, I think what's going to happen with the current government, with all this thing about devolution, I think naturally more and more support is going to be pushed down to local government. We're going to talk about that specifically, 3 areas that you need to be looking at. Now, not in the 23 billion unclaimed figure is this charitable support. And the reason I put this here, Kate, is because I volunteer, as you know, 1 day a week at Citizens Advice, and obviously I use the benefit calculator with people, which is why we brought it into salary finance and making it available to people. But also there is lots of charities that support people with one-off payments or buying them white goods or helping them with home adaptations or whatever it is. And for instance, there are some charities that focus on, say, for instance, the grocery sector, and we've got a lot of exposure in our 4 million plus employee reach in the charity sector. So if you've worked in or you currently work in the grocery sector, they will make available grants to you. It may not be massive, but they're grants. People like Boots have got a benevolent fund. British Gas is a foundation, not just for British Gas customers, but anyone in energy deficiency. And there's lots of other massive endowments that want to help. And some of them are general, some of them are very geographical based, and some of them are based on current or previous occupations. And there's a great grant finder from a company called Turn to Us. It's a charity. It's available on our website as well, where they'll help you find the grant if there's one available. And these grants come and go. So again, that's not part of the 23 billion, that's on top. But people, again, if you need a new fridge or a freezer and perhaps you're a little bit stretched at the moment, perhaps you're having difficulties, that could be worth having. Amazing. So we got a question now, haven't we? Which is, we want to know, are you aware of what financial support is available from your local council? So, yes, no, vague idea, didn't know the council provided financial support. So don't be shy, please get involved.
I think, and just to make everyone feel reassured, if you didn't know, like I certainly wouldn't know, and I'm pretty sure that most of my peers, friends, family wouldn't know either. It's not something we talk about. I think it's definitely a really important, well, it's a resource that we should definitely check out, shouldn't we?
Well, we go back to that reason why people aren't claiming: awareness. And then secondly, complexity.
Yeah.
So the thing about local government support is, first of all, you've got to go onto your local government website or ring them up and claim it. Some of the benefits and support they give are time limited, might be one-off or for 12 months.
Yeah.
And also the support that local government can give you can vary according to what central government's paying them, what's giving them on grant settlements.
Yeah.
So, not surprised that people don't know or didn't even look. 28% didn't know council provided financial support, right?
That's crazy.
Because we've moved to this universal credit, which universal credit has a housing element, it has a living element, there's potentially a children element, different elements of it.
Yeah.
And over the years, they've been taking over providing the housing element, whereas years ago it used to be councils that provided housing benefit for people. So let's move on then. Thank you for that, everyone. Let's just talk about three of the big ones that I see a lot when I'm working with people, when I'm advising citizens advice. So we have discretionary housing payments. So this is for people who are renting, not in social housing or local authority housing, which tend to be a lot lower cost anyway. They tend to be well below the market rate. So local authority housing might be 400 and the market rate might be 800. They tend to be a lot lower. This is for people who are renting privately and where the housing benefit they're getting from either the council, if it's an old legacy benefit, or more often with most people now, it's the housing element of universal credit, where it's not enough to meet the cost of the market rent. So what councils can do, you have to apply to them. It normally lasts for 12 months and you have to reapply. So it's a limited period. But you can apply for this top-up payment. Now, it may not be right up to the top of the market rent, but it will get you a long way there, and it will stop you having as much strain as you would have had. This one, discretionary housing payments, is the one that we see often is not being claimed. It's good to qualify for universal credit because that's often the requirements that the council have on you. But if you're still in receipt of old working tax credits, the old legacy benefits, and you're still on them, you may still qualify. If you're in receipt of sick benefits, which we'll talk about in a minute, you may benefit. So each council has a slightly different criteria. Council tax reduction, this is the big one. And again, goes close to home. My mother-in-law is nearly 90. I only realised recently that she actually qualifies for a reduction in her council tax. So there's two types of reductions. There's a reduction because the number of people in your house is one, is not, you're meant to be based on two people, but if there's only one of you live there, or one adult, and for one adult, we also exclude anyone who's severely disabled. So if there's two of you and one of you severely disabled, you're still counted as one adult, okay? So if there's one adult, you get 25% reduction. If, however, your financial circumstances are such that the council assesses that you are on a low income or have minimal savings, then you can qualify for a council tax reduction of up to 100%. Now, in my mother-in-law's case, she's not got massive income, but she's not terrible. She hasn't got huge amounts of savings, but she hasn't got no savings. She qualifies for about £40 a month reduction on her £180 a month council tax, on top of the single person deduction. Until we claim for it, obviously you have to put her bank statements in and show that she hadn't given all the money away. But the point is that's going, that helps. That means she can go out and have lunch, or she can give people a birthday gift, or she can have that little treat.
Yeah.
And then the final one is the Household Support Fund. So the Household Support Fund is this term for this lump of money that the government gives local authorities, and in the case of Wales and Scotland, the devolved governments, a pot of money for them to use as they seem fit on local needs, for people in need. So I live in Suffolk, and Suffolk County Council administers it for the whole of Suffolk, all the boroughs, all the councils. And the only criteria is you mustn't earn more than £27,500. You mustn't have more than £1,500 in savings or investments, so excluding your house and excluding your pension. You must be over 16, and you must be, in financial distress, or deemed that you're having a bit of stress. And it's £300 one-off grant, and you can claim that twice a year. Now, Now, this household support fund support probably will change when we get a new budget, but it's still available all the way through the council. Get in now because we're only 3 months into the financial year. Yeah. And even if it doesn't affect you, it might affect someone you know, a friend, a relative, or a colleague or whatever. Again, household support fund. It's called different things. So in Suffolk, it's called the Local Welfare Assistance Scheme, which doesn't sound very inspiring, does it? But that's what it is. And other councils give out vouchers, or they'll give you credits, or they'll give you money towards your energy, etc. So again, they're the low-hanging fruit. But there are other things like reduced insulation if you want to upgrade your insulation of your house, help towards other home improvements, adaptations. Again, check out from your local council's website what help is available for families. So have we got any more questions?
Yes, we definitely have. I think that's super helpful and a good point to pause. I definitely didn't know a lot of that you've kind of just touched on there, particularly the insulation one. That was new to me.
Well, as a new homeowner, you're going to know all about it.
Yeah, getting excited about sorting these bills.
Yeah, growing up.
So, yes, we have a lot of questions. Bear with me 1 second. I think this is a really important question to ask, actually. And perhaps we're going to come on to this, Jason, in a moment. But what would be your advice for someone who might be off work sick due to mental health challenges?
Right, it's a big problem. Obviously, I deal in citizen advice one-to-one. I deal with people who are having challenges, mental health challenges. And as we know, when you're not in a great place with mental health, your finances can either collapse or go off beam, or bad finances can lead to mental health challenges. So I'm going to touch on sick pay situations and what to do in sick pay. But what can you do? The first thing you need to do is make sure that you're not trying to deal with this on your own. So we mentioned earlier citizens advice, we mentioned the money helper. It may be your employer, if you're off work sick, has got an employee assistance plan. Most employers that we work with make available an employee assistance scheme. So the first port of call is probably to ring them. And just see what help is available. The second thing is if we've got this benefit calculator, which we're going to give you the QR code for, to see if there's anything you're entitled to. This makes it really easy. There's a short version and a longer version. But if you don't feel able to cope with that, and when you are having a mental health challenge, what can seem easy and straightforward to someone who's not having that mental health challenge can actually feel so overwhelming it can make you paralysed. You know, I know I've worked with people where they felt that getting out of bed was the toughest thing they could do. So trying to work out what their finances were about was almost like a bridge too far. So your local citizens advice, they are busy, but contact them and they will have someone who can help you, a general advisor or even a money specialist. So they will help you and take you through benefit calculators, make sure you're getting all the help that you're entitled to if you feel you can't do it yourself. The other thing is to reach out to perhaps a colleague. Many employers we work with have wellbeing ambassadors, many of which, we help them, equip them with the money side of things, but they are wellbeing ambassadors, and it could be one of those colleagues, whether it's someone you know or if someone you know of is in a wellbeing network someone who might be able to help you or signpost you to help. So the key thing is don't suffer in silence. It's tough enough dealing with a mental health challenge, but you don't have to deal with it on your own.
Thank you, Jason. Question here saying, what about divorce? Single person living in the family home but sharing child custody equally.
Okay, so I'm assuming the relationship's broken down, but you're both still living in the marital or the pre-relationship home, is that right?
No, single person living in the family home, but so sharing custody. Living
in the family home with the child, and the ex-partner's moved on.
Presumably.
Okay, so the question is first thing I'd be thinking of is the ex-partner paying his or her contribution to child support? Okay, just walking, I've seen this before, not paying anything or token gesture is it's not good, is it? It's putting you under strain. You've created a child together, so you should be supporting the child. We don't live in a perfect world, and in an ideal world, if a relationship's broken down, well, that's a shame, but you don't want to be living on the back foot. So the first thing is to make sure that the partner who's moved out is making a contribution. And I see a lot of the time people saying, well, I can't afford to because I've had to move out. Well, okay, but the person who's left can't afford to shoulder all the blame on their own, all of the strain on their own. So make sure you're getting help there. And if you aren't getting help, then you could consider using the Children's Support Agency to help you enforce that person paying benefits. But try and do it amicably to start with. Most people will step up to the plate. The second thing is that when you've had a change in circumstances like that, you've probably had a reduction in your household income. So the chances of you qualifying for additional assistance from the state, certainly in terms of means testing, is going to be much higher. And if your child has any form of disability, mental or physical, which has been actually diagnosed and properly got a medical diagnosis, then you can potentially get even more help, okay? And it might be, and this is what I say, I don't know if the person's renting or buying, it might be that actually the house that you're living in is too big for you, what you can afford and your circumstances now. And you might actually need, if you're in a 3-bedroom place, perhaps go down to a 2-bedroom. Just makes it more affordable. It's not ideal. We all want more space, but the point is cutting your cloth to what your reality is part of dealing with it. But the other thing is, if this is a recent thing, I always say when you've had a big trauma in your life, so whether you won money, whether you've lost money, whether you got married, you haven't got married, you got divorced, you got separated, don't make big rash decisions when you're still in that, what I call that raw period, when you've had a trauma, a big change in your circumstances, but still engage with your finances and remember it's progress, not perfection.
So thank you.
Yeah. Now, that brings me on to, I think we had that question about illness. This is a busy slide, okay? And I'm sorry about it. It's the busiest slide we've got. But the reason I've got it on here is because I think it's important to know when we're speaking about all the things that you can claim, I think it's also important to talk about, you know, the big thing that causes financial stress for people is when they have a drop in their family income, their household income. And the biggest reason for that, notwithstanding people, you know, starting a family and needing to take time off, is if they're ill. Or disabled, whether that's mental or physical. So all employees, as long as you've paid, you know, you've got the appropriate national insurance credits, everyone gets statutory sick pay as a minimum of £116 a week, okay? That's not a lot of money, is it? Not in a, even in, if you're in a low income area and you haven't got a massive lifestyle.
100%,
it's not a lot of money. And that's paid for up to 28 weeks. Now, statutory sick pay, your employer, many employers we work with do pay more than that. So, for instance, in the NHS, you can get full pay for up to 6 months, then half pay for another 6 months, and then after that, it's sort of basically you're on your own, or potentially you could claim your pension. But there are many employers who will pay more than statutory sick pay, okay? And then when statutory sick pay finishes, you can claim employment support allowance. So this is basically, I'm unable to work due to illness, so I can claim an amount between £90 to £138 a week. And that can go on for up to the end of 12 months, okay? You can't claim that until you've finished statutory sick pay. You can claim that on top of, if your employer's still paying you, as long as you're not working more than 16 hours a week, you can still claim that, and it's not means tested, okay? Now, on top of that, what's medically assessed and not means tested is personal independence payments, okay? Now, these are payable from the 13th week of the disability or illness. And they can be paid up to state pension age. Now, these are quite hard to get. There's a lower level and there's a higher level and there's different components, but that's why it's between £72 and £184 a week. But PIP is for people who have got quite a severe situation, finding mobility really difficult, need a high level of support and help, but it can be paid in addition to ESA. Now, means tested, state benefits, universal credit, this is basically if you meet the capital threshold and the income threshold, you will receive a sliding benefit of anything from £311 to £1,609 per month, depending on whether you've got children, depending on, you know, what your income you're earning elsewhere. And if you're in receipt of ESA, employment support allowance, that's deducted from universal credit. So you can't double up with those, but you can double up with these, okay? Now, remember, even if you only qualify for £1 on universal credit, it opens the door for all those other things, social tariffs, free dental care, etc. Now, the interesting thing about universal credit is you can get additional help with up to 85% of childcare costs. And that's up to £1,739 per month if you've got 2 children. Right? You can also get help with rental costs, as I've said before, which I mentioned before about discretionary housing payment. But there may be, if you're on legacy benefits, that the circumstances are slightly different. So I'm not going to go into like working tax credits. But the point I want to make here is, and this brings me on, is regardless of sick pay arrangements, regardless of benefit entitlement, regardless of anything else you can claim from your local authority, having an adequate cash reserve, an emergency fund, a kind of, oh my God, you know, the car tyre's gone wrong, the boiler's blown up, things that you can't anticipate that can blow you off beam. They're not necessarily going to be massive amounts, but if you've got no money for it, it's a big issue. So I want to know, how big is your emergency fund? Is it more than enough, almost enough, not quite enough, not enough, don't have one? So this is a pot of money that you can put your hands on in the event that something goes wrong and you can put your hands on it and you can use it to meet living costs. So let's have a look then. Bit shy today, this crowd. So come on then. Not enough, more than enough, not quite enough, don't have one, almost enough, more than enough. So that's interesting. Oh,
yeah.
Okay, that's because that tends to be the smallest one, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And this is, I mean, I think again to reassure, like it's similar to what we were seeing this morning. And if people are honest, they don't have what they would consider to be enough in that sort of buffer account.
Well,
like
let me tell you, when I was in my 20s, I had no emergency fund, and I had credit cards and overdrafts and everything. I was negative. Okay.
Yeah.
And you know, if I'd have shown you my bank account, honestly, I'd have been embarrassed.
Right.
So I know what it's like to not have your hands on money.
Yeah.
And because of the scarring I had in my early life and those early experiences of really being up against it, over the years I gradually got rid of the debt. Then I built up 1 month of essential living costs. So it's not everything, it's just the essentials, you know, your rent, your mortgage, your food, you know, light and the basics, transportation, get to work or whatever.
Yeah.
Just the basics. Then I got up to 2 months, then I got to 3 months, then I got to 6 months, then I got to 12 months. And for me, having 12 months, don't get me wrong, that works for me.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to get there. I gradually moved forward, a bit like when you're doing a race, if you're into racing, running, you know, you try and get to the next lot of people in front of you. Don't think about the race leaders. You gradually build this up. So you're always thinking, have I got enough in my emergency fund? Because the emergency fund, remember with COVID, people didn't have an emergency fund, needed money from the government. We also found that because we couldn't spend money on rubbish we didn't need, we started building up savings, and still households have got savings. So here we go. Not enough. Most people haven't got enough, not quite enough. So here's the thing. The key thing there is to do what you need to do to build up some emergency savings so you can almost self-insure. Okay.
Yeah. And I think as well important, sorry, just to build on that point, it's not obviously, you know, 12 months of emergency fund might not feel attainable to a lot of people who are listening.
And we're not
but
saying
it's
that's
not
right.
about that, is it? It's just about having a little bit and focusing on that great amount that you have managed to
If you can
save.
get £1,000 together, having never had an emergency fund, even if you've got debts, that's a win, okay? And that will put a fire break between you and more debt. We don't want people to be accruing debt unnecessarily. Now, we live in the real world. As we know, salary funds provide salary-linked loans, but it's affordable, it's sensibly priced, and it's designed. You could use that to get rid of old debt or to avoid getting into expensive debt if you can't avoid, say, you've got to buy a small car to get to work or whatever. But the point is, build that £1,000 to prove you can do it. Sell off gear, you know, sell off stuff, you know, cancel subscriptions, whatever it is. Just get that together. Then get rid of the debt and then start improving on it. If you just had 1 month's essential living costs in an emergency fund, I'm telling you, you'd have less rows with your partner. You'd feel less anxious. You'd feel a bit more able to cope. And all the research shows people who can sort of say, I feel like I can cope with life's curveballs. And we're going to be speaking about that at the September live stream. We're going to be speaking to Stacey Lohman, who's a good friend of mine, money coach, about actually preparing for life's crap, basically.
Awesome. Right, let's have another question, a bit of a pause there. I think this is a really good question, and it probably varies by benefits. But someone has asked, how long does it take to receive benefits once you've made a claim?
Oh, now, it depends what you're claiming for. Universal credit, generally speaking, as long as you meet the capital and the income, you know, you don't exceed those levels, that's normally paid quite quickly. So and Citizens Advice have a great help to claim line as well. And it'll all be on the benefit calculator when we show you the details. The quickest I've seen it paid is within a week. And it will be backdated as well. And the longest I've seen it take is 3.5 months.
Wow, okay.
And that's often when people who've got chaotic lifestyles aren't responding to their work coach or requests for information and stuff like that. But if you're pretty much on it and you provide the information they're asking for and you actually respond, it can be pretty quick.
Can be quick.
It just depends. Things like PIP, personal independence payment, if you're trying to apply for a longer term benefit, that can take many, many months because depending on the severity of the illness and depending on what you're claiming for and depending on how good your form is, you will have to have a medical assessment or a capability assessment. And that can take many, many months. It will be backdated, but it can take, I've seen it take, in one case, take as long as 10 months to get the benefit.
Wow. Okay.
So that's why, again, we want people to have that emergency fund to give you that breathing space. Now, you can take, with universal credit, you can take an advance even when you're accepted pending, because it's always paid monthly in arrears, so you can take an advance, but then you've got to pay that off. Other benefits like council tax reduction, depends on how good your council is. My local council took about 2.5 weeks to claim her reduction,
Okay.
But I've heard of other people taking 2 months. So it really depends on what you're claiming, whether it's local authority or the central government, and depends on how quick and fast you are with stuff.
Fab. I am conscious of time, but I think actually something that leads us really nicely into the calculator we're going to talk about is actually the most popular question is what would be the best route to identify which state benefits someone would or could be eligible for?
Perfect
So
question.
that leads us quite nicely to kind of the last few sort of slides.
Yeah. So before we get into that, regardless of claiming or earning or spending, the point here is we want to remind you about spending. That you have to learn. This is the skill that everyone has to learn. It doesn't matter how much you earn. As I say to my daughters, when you're dating a guy, don't ask him how much he earns. Ask him how much he saves, right? And it's great advice. I mean, they don't say that. They don't have that on their dating profile. But the point is, well made, is that learning actually to control your day-to-day spending is a lifelong endeavour. We're not taught it at home. And so therefore, no matter how much you get paid from whatever source, you've got to learn that skill of holding on to the money in a fashion that works for you. So the key about a spending plan rather than a budget is you're deciding to tell your money where you want it to go before you receive it rather than wondering where it went. Okay. So the smart spending system, which is on the Learn website, which we'll give you details in a minute, it's just a framework, regardless of whether you use a budgeting app, a spreadsheet, a piece of paper, whatever. And it's a great way of having a conversation with your partner, if you have one, to get you both on the same page. The importance of an emergency fund, a smoothing fund for the things that we've got to spend regularly, but not necessarily every month. You've got to put money aside. The fund money, the current money, and the future versus the essential versus fun. It's okay to have fun, right? But you have to have the fun that you can afford.
Yeah.
So the point here is it's about recognising we live in the real messy world that's all full of shades of grey, that essentially we are going to try and put a framework around things, not a straitjacket. So that brings us on to part of that, training your money, is making sure you're getting everything you're entitled to. So we have partnered with Policy and Practice to provide free of use, completely anonymous, so we don't know who is using it and neither do your employer. All that we know is the numbers of people who are using it, the average claim that they've identified, and the total number value. Because obviously we're paying for this, and the reason we're paying for it is because we want people to win. And part of breaking down the stigma and raising the awareness is giving people a tool that will show them what they may be entitled to and to make sure that they can find an easy way of claiming it. So this Better Off calculator is built by Policy and Practice. It's the one that I use and all my colleagues use when we volunteer at Citizens Advice. We know how powerful it is. It really, really works. And there's 2 versions of it. There's a short form version, which you answer a small number of questions and it tells you whether it might make sense to do, we think you may be entitled, answer some more questions and we can be a bit clearer. So it's like a triage. When you go to A&E and they say, have you just got a graze on your hand and are you going to be okay, or do we need to get you in quickly?
Yeah.
And so basically there's a short form and a long form. So what I thought I'd do is I'd let Devon Gillaney, who's one of the architects of it from Policy and Practice, explain the difference between the short form calculator and the full check calculator.
Well, it's great to be working with Salary Finance and rolling out Better Off as part of the Salary Finance offer. The quick check element of it quickly analyses for everyone that's using Salary Finance whether or not they're likely to be eligible for something. So a lot of times people just assume they're not eligible. This is doing a quick check on everyone to see whether or not they're likely to be eligible for something at all. So we're not wasting people's time, but actually what it tends to show is a lot more people are eligible than they might think, and it's worthwhile them doing a more fuller check. And that fuller check is what you need to do to get a really accurate assessment of the full range of support you're eligible for. So again, if you try and do this without kind of asking all of the questions, you can be misadvised. It's really important in the social security space that you get the right advice, firstly to maximize your eligibility, but also to make sure you're not misinforming the relevant authorities, and it's about doing things in the right way as well.
So that's the difference. And here is the QR code that people can use. We also, one of my colleagues will be putting in the website, the dedicated website address that you can actually access the calculator. And here's the thing, even if you think this doesn't apply to you, this may apply to friends, relatives or colleagues. So please tell your colleagues about it. There's a drop down box to say what employer you work for when you do the check. That's purely so we can report to the employer, look, we've had 100, 400, 500 people use the calculator, because they're really interested. All they want to know is, are people using it? So we've made this available. We're paying for this ourselves as part of the normal service because we want people to win. So that's on there and we want people to use that. And as far as we're concerned, is even if you found £100, it was worth your time. Think about what you earn per hour. Now, if you take the average person's earning between sort of the minimum wage is what, just under £11. Perhaps your average is £15 an hour. Some people might earn £25 an hour. Is it worth you an hour of your time? Right? If you've got just £100, that's more than most people earn an hour, right? So it is worth you spending the time doing that.
Awesome.
Now, we've also got the Learn website, which most employers make this available via their portal. And this is available for you to use and access all the videos, all of the webinar and the live stream recordings. So we've got them on, learning to control spending. We've got them about every kind of subject you can imagine, going back, several years. So there's great subject matter on there. There's lessons where we teach you about stuff. There's blogs, there's tools, and the Better Off calculators on there as well. So that's there. Have we got any more questions before we wrap up?
We've got some really good questions.
Right, so we better horse into them.
One I'd like to ask, is as a graduate going straight to employment, what are the most important financial decisions or benefits to be aware of?
Now we've just filmed some insights for that. Do you know what you need to do is you need to, if you've just gone into a job, can I just ask, please do have fun, do make friends, don't live like a monk, but try and live more like a student than someone who's not a student. And what I mean by that is if you can hold your spending down, doesn't matter what you're earning, if you can just keep living like that student, value beans are good, right? Okay? Just keep it simple. Do a couple of years of living more like a student than a non-student. Learn to develop good habits of building that emergency fund, avoiding debt, making sure that you can try and control your impulses, your emotions. Learn to develop an identity around money where it's not determining who you are. You're not, it doesn't matter what you're earning. Just learn to build the habits or start saving regularly. Perhaps, I don't know circumstances, as long as you've got no debt and you're starting to build an emergency fund, perhaps put 25, 30 quid a month into an investment ISA. I'm not saying it's a recommendation. I'm just saying, think about that. Getting used to the muscle and habits, the good habits. By all means, have fun. But as you see from the smart spending system, if you download it, we say have the fun, put the fun aside in a separate account, and once the money's run out, the fun's got to stop, all right? Because if the fun doesn't stop, what happens is you end up spending money you haven't got or money that you earmarked for other things. So my advice is to try and live for a student a couple more years, all right, and keep your expenses as low as you can while you get ahead. Once you're ahead, then you can ease off and open up the purse strings a bit.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. We've touched on a little bit of this already, but I do just want to ask one more question. What support is there for the average earner? So this person said, just because, it just feels like, despite the cost of living crisis, no provision is made for average workers who pay at least 20 to 40% in taxes.
Right. I totally understand the sentiment. We don't live in a fair world. Okay, the government can't help everyone, and there will always be a point when someone feels deserving and they feel that they're struggling and that they're working hard and trying to play by the rules, and they still find that they're not getting ahead. I totally sympathise with that. But there has to be a cut-off point when the government can't just keep providing everyone with help. However, we are seeing there has been a bit of, I'm not going to get a political thing, national insurance has been put back a bit to hopefully offset the pay increase, the tax increases from the frozen allowances. So there have been some tweaks. There's still generous pension and entitlements and tax treatments. How long that, who knows? And there are things like LISAs and ISAs that you can use. So I do sympathise. But you've got to understand, if there is no help for you, then what you have to do is you have to say, okay, what needs to be true for me to move ahead and make progress? Do I need to get better at controlling my spending? Do I need to be more thoughtful and having conversations with my partner? Do I need to improve my skills to get a promotion and a pay rise? Do I need to think about taking more responsibility to increase my pay? Do I need to sell off stuff? Do I need to look at how I'm responding to events and emotions about spending? Am I hanging out with the wrong people? There's always things that you can do that can move the dial. It might be small, but it can make a difference. So look, we've almost run out of time there. Thank you everyone for answering those questions. But what we want to know, don't we, Kate, is what people are going to do after today's sessions.
Yeah.
So that's why the word cloud's there, because we want you to tell us in your words, even if it's nothing we've spoken about today, right?
Yeah, big or small.
It could be just something we've inspired you to think about. Just put it in the word cloud, because this is really important for us, because we like to know what people are saying. This is how you can tell us what you're going to do. It seemed a bit. Oh, here we go. Use the calculator. Like it. Well done.
Yep.
Yeah. Reevaluate my expenditure. Yeah. Remember, it's not no fun.
Yeah.
It's the fun that you can afford or you want to afford, right?
Yeah, definitely. And everyone's at a different point in their financial wellbeing journey, aren't they? Like some people have done that sort of smart spending piece already and they've worked out what their buckets look like.
Yeah.
For others, like I know when I joined this business, I definitely hadn't seen that before. And that's the first point, is like knowledge first, right? Like work out what it looks like for you and what your situation is. And then you can make an informed decision on how you can improve it.
That's right. And the thing is, remember with your money, it's progress, not perfection. And it's not about anyone else. If you move forward, if you can make that move forward and you can actually make progress, that's progress.
Yeah.
And I'm proud of everyone. We have lovely stories, don't we, of people saying, you just gave me the kick up the backside, or you just remind me, you gave me the excuse. Listen, we're not here to judge.
Yeah.
All we want is you to win with money on whatever terms make sense to you.
Exactly.
And what makes this job enjoyable for us is that we hear lovely stories. And I'll leave you with a final story, was I remember when someone got out of debt, started building emergency savings through us, his wife said, you look taller. Now, for me, that's a win.
That's lovely.
Great stuff.
Awesome.
Well, anyway, well, thank you everyone for joining us, and it's been great.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Really great that you were able to join us today. Our next live stream will be in September, when we'll be talking about navigating life's curveballs.
Curveballs, that's right. Yeah, coping for drama. Yeah.
In the meantime, definitely check out Salary Finance, check out our Learn materials, and on there you'll be able to find the Better Off calculator. Thank you again for your time this afternoon.
Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.